Welcome to True Crime Pulse. On the evening of July 9, 2007, the bustling streets of Ginan City in Shandong Province were jolted by a sudden and devastating explosion. At approximately 5:30 p.m., a powerful blast shattered the peace on Jinshi Road, obliterating a light blue Honda and sending shockwaves through the area. The explosion's intensity not only destroyed the vehicle but also scattered its driver's remains across nearby storefronts. Tragically, the driver, a 31-year-old woman named Liu Haiping, was killed instantly. The force of the blast injured several bystanders, including a fruit vendor struck by debris and requiring over 10 stitches and a taxi driver whose vehicle caught fire, leaving him severely burned. The scene descended into chaos as residents and passers-by gathered, speculating wildly about the cause of the incident. Initially, some witnesses suggested the explosion was caused by a routine traffic accident or a fuel tank malfunction. However, the scale of the destruction raised doubts. Could a simple accident or a ruptured fuel tank cause such devastation? This question lingered in the minds of both witnesses and investigators as they worked to uncover the truth. Police arrived swiftly, confirming one fatality, several injuries, and the destruction of multiple vehicles. With such a significant incident occurring in the heart of a bustling city, the urgency to determine the cause of the explosion intensified. What initially seemed like a tragic accident quickly unraveled into a sinister mystery. A preliminary investigation revealed a shocking detail: the explosion was caused by TNT, a tightly controlled military-grade explosive. This revelation immediately shifted the case from a presumed accident to a deliberate act of violence. The authorities now faced a chilling question: who could have planned such a heinous act, and why? Forensic analysis identified the victim as Liu Haiping, a high-ranking political cadre and deputy secretary of the Youth League Committee at the Ginan Municipal Land Resources Bureau. She lived a comfortable life in a luxurious apartment and drove the recently destroyed Honda. However, it wasn't Liu's affluence that caught investigators' attention, it was her unique position as a government official. The brutal murder of a female state official in such a public setting quickly became a scandal, drawing intense public and political scrutiny. The investigation took an unexpected turn when police discovered critical evidence near the explosion site. Among the debris, they found a shattered mobile phone and a remote control device. Cross-referencing telecom records led them to Chen Ji, a 50-year-old deputy team leader in the Ginan Municipal Public Security Bureau. This connection became even more suspicious when linked to the use of TNT material accessible only to individuals in special positions, like Chen. Surveillance footage and witness accounts further implicated Chen, as his police vehicle was seen near the crime scene shortly before the explosion. Residue matching the explosive was later found inside the car, solidifying his involvement. As investigators delved deeper, another shocking layer of the case emerged. A search of Liu Haiping's residence uncovered personal items, including family photographs and intimate pictures of her, with a man identified as Duan Yi He, the director of the Standing Committee of the Ginan Municipal People's Congress. Their romantic relationship suggested a possible motive, though it remained unclear how it connected to the crime. 3 suspects quickly emerged: Liu's ex-husband, Chen Ji, and Duan Yi He. While her ex-husband was eventually ruled out, a deeper investigation revealed a startling link between Chen and Duan. Chen was Duan's nephew-in-law. This familial connection, coupled with mounting evidence, pointed to a conspiracy involving both men. On July 11th, just 3 days after the explosion, Chen Ji was arrested. Confronted with overwhelming evidence, he confessed to carrying out the crime under Duan's orders. The shocking motive was rooted in jealousy and fear. Liu had allegedly threatened to expose her relationship with Duan, which could have jeopardized his political career. In a desperate bid to silence her, Duan orchestrated the murder, enlisting his nephew-in-law to carry out the plan. The case sent shockwaves through Jinan's political circles. Duan Yi He, a powerful provincial official, was arrested on July 13th. During interrogation, he quickly broke down, confessing his role in the plot. Within days, a deeply disturbing conspiracy had been unraveled, revealing a brutal crime driven by personal vendettas and the abuse of power. The investigation into Liu Haiping's murder highlighted the dark underbelly of political corruption and the lengths some would go to protect their secrets. The case not only brought justice to Liu but also exposed a web of deceit, leaving a lasting impact on the region's political landscape. Duan Yi He, a once respected political leader, ultimately confessed to orchestrating the devastating explosion on July 9th. He admitted that he used his nephew-in-law, Chen Ji, as a pawn in executing this monstrous plan. During the grueling interrogation, Yi He expressed regret, but his remorse was chillingly misplaced. He did not grieve the loss of Liu Haiping's life. Instead, he lamented the method he had chosen to carry out her murder. Without hesitation or shame, he admitted that if given another chance, he would still have sought her death, though he would have done it differently. His words were devoid of humanity, his tone cold and unrepentant, save for his dissatisfaction with the execution of the crime. This lack of emotional connection to the life he destroyed revealed an unsettling truth to him. The act was less about ending her life, and more about ensuring their ill-fated romance concluded on his terms. This revelation sent a chilling wave through the investigation team. How could a relationship that once sparked with passion devolve into such hatred and violence? What had turned love into loathing and care into contempt? To uncover these answers, investigators delved into Yi He's past, unearthing a story of ambition, power, betrayal, and greed. Yi He's life began humbly. Born on January 17, 1946, in a poor farming village, his early years were marked by hardship. The daily struggles of rural life shaped him, from cutting grass in the morning mist to herding buffalo under the scorching sun and feeding pigs late into the evening. A deep scar on his left hand, earned during a wood-cutting accident in his youth, served as a permanent reminder of those grueling years. Despite his circumstances, Yi He was driven by an unyielding ambition to escape the confines of his impoverished upbringing. In 1965, his dedication paid off when he became the first person from his village to pass the entrance exam for Xi'an University. His achievement was celebrated as a triumph for the community, likened to a golden phoenix soaring from a humble chicken coop. His academic success opened doors to an illustrious career in politics, where his charisma and sharp intellect allowed him to climb the ranks swiftly. Throughout his rise to power, Yi He maintained the image of a humble and principled official. He took pride in his connection to his roots, often returning to his village and walking its familiar dirt roads. His down-to-earth demeanor and interest in the villagers' lives earned him widespread admiration. To many, Yi He was the epitome of integrity, a beacon of hope that one could rise above their station without losing their moral compass. But beneath the polished exterior of this celebrated official lay hidden flaws, vulnerabilities that would ultimately lead to his downfall. In 1996, Yi He's life took a dark turn when he met Liu Haiping, a young and attentive employee who worked in the agency's guest house, where he stayed during a work transfer. At just 18 years old, Haiping was assigned to look after Yi He, ensuring his every need was met, from preparing meals to washing clothes and laying out his toothpaste. Her care and devotion gradually broke through his defenses, filling the void of loneliness he felt during his time away from his wife. For Haiping, Yi He was more than a man. He was a symbol of power and success, the embodiment of authority. Despite the 30-year age gap, their interaction sparked an illicit affair, one that neither seemed willing to end. When Yi He was transferred back to Ginan, he faced a choice: leave the relationship behind or continue it in secrecy. Overcome by his attachment, he chose the latter. Abusing his authority, he arranged for Haiping to be transferred to a job under the Shandong Provincial Electronics Industry Bureau and secured her a private apartment in Ginan, creating a hidden second life. Over the years, Yi He showered Haiping with material wealth and influence, buying her another apartment and a car while ensuring her career advancement. Yet, these gestures of devotion masked a growing dependency and corruption. Haiping's demands became insatiable, and Yi He, once celebrated for his incorruptibility, began accepting bribes and using his influence for personal gain to appease her. Haiping, too, exploited the relationship to its fullest. She brought her family to Ginan, securing jobs and housing for them through Yi He's connections. While she enjoyed the fruits of her lover's power, her greed and manipulation deepened, further entangling Yi He in a web of corruption. This toxic relationship, driven by mutual dependency and exploitation, eventually began to unravel. Yi He's wife, aware of his infidelity, pleaded with him to end the affair and repair their marriage. Though he promised to sever ties with Haiping, he continued the relationship in secret. In an attempt to maintain appearances, Haiping even married a doctor, but their affair persisted, leading to the collapse of her marriage. The dissolution of trust and love between Yihe and Haiping transformed into a simmering animosity. Haiping, embittered by her inability to secure Yihe's undivided affection, began demanding more wealth, power, and security to safeguard her future. Yihe, exhausted by her unending demands, started to see her as a threat to his career and reputation. By 2006, their relationship had reached its breaking point. Haiping, now holding a position at the Land Resources Bureau thanks to Yihe's influence, continued to push for a luxurious apartment, a new car, and greater status. Each demand drove Yihe further into a corner, fueling his resentment and leading him to view her as a liability. This spiral of greed, betrayal, and desperation culminated in Yihe's decision to end her life. To him, the explosion was not merely a means to eliminate Haiping, but a final act of control, a way to erase the chaos she had brought into his life. Yet his cold indifference toward her death and his chilling acknowledgement of his intent underscored the depth of his moral decay. Haiping's insatiable greed was not merely a longing for material wealth, it was a deep-rooted yearning born from years of emotional neglect, loneliness, and the gradual erosion of her self-worth. For all the luxuries she had acquired through her relationship with Yihe, there remained an overwhelming emptiness in her life. In her vast, cold apartment, surrounded by the trappings of wealth, Haiping's existence felt like a constant reminder of the price she had paid for those luxuries: the secrecy, the lies, and the emptiness of knowing she could never truly claim the life she wanted. Every day she lived in the shadows, her only reprieve being the rare moments when Yihe would visit, typically after 10 p.m., when the world outside had gone quiet. These stolen hours were enough to sustain her for a while, but they were never enough to fill the void that gnawed at her soul. The isolation she felt in those dark, empty spaces only fueled her desire for something more, a legitimate place beside Yihe, one that was not defined by secrecy, manipulation, and subterfuge. Haiping began to dream of a life where she could openly be with him, standing proudly at his side, no longer forced to hide behind the walls of their forbidden relationship. The constant need to keep their affair hidden had become unbearable. She no longer wanted to be the invisible woman lurking in the background of his life. She wanted to be his equal, his partner, someone who could be seen and acknowledged by the world. But for Yihe, from the very beginning, Haiping was nothing more than a brief, fleeting distraction, a romantic indulgence that was never meant to extend beyond the temporary. To him, she was a passing fancy, a young woman who provided excitement and a break from the monotony of his life. But nothing more. In his mind, she could never take the place of his legitimate wife or share in the responsibilities of his public life. Their relationship was meant to be kept in the shadows, and Haiping, despite her hopes, would never be allowed to walk beside him in the light of day. As the months passed, the gap between their desires widened, and the tension between them grew. Arguments, once rare and fleeting, became more frequent and increasingly violent. Haiping's frustration boiled over, and she began to use their secret relationship as leverage against Yihe, threatening to expose the affair to the world. These threats were not just born from a desire for revenge, but from the pain of years of emotional manipulation and neglect. She wanted to force Yihe into giving her the recognition and respect she felt she deserved, but instead of softening him, these threats only deepened the resentment in Yihe's heart. Yihe, who had once treated her with indifference, began to view her as an ever-present danger to his carefully constructed world. He had given her everything: money, power, access, but now she had become ungrateful. She had started to demand more than he was willing to give. She wanted more than material wealth. She wanted to tear down the walls of secrecy and force him to accept her publicly. This, in Yihe's eyes, was a betrayal. After all, he had done so much for her. He had used his influence to elevate her and her family, but now, in his view, she was attempting to destroy everything he had worked for. This sense of betrayal ignited a fury in Yihe, a fury that would not be extinguished by simple words or promises. The mounting pressure, the constant fear of exposure, and the growing realization that Haiping could ruin everything he had built led Yihe down a dark path. He began to consider what, to him, seemed the only solution: eliminate her. His mind, once sharp and calculating, now focused solely on the idea of erasing her from his life. The mere thought of her threatening to expose his secrets and tear down his power became a source of intense fear. In his heart, the seeds of a sinister plan were sown. Though he tried to suppress these thoughts, they continued to fester. The more time he spent with Haiping, the more the idea of her removal took hold. He knew he could not act alone, however. This kind of plan required someone who was both loyal and discreet, someone who could be trusted to keep their involvement a secret, and someone who would be bold enough to carry out such a dangerous act. The search for the perfect accomplice began, and after much deliberation, Yihe chose his nephew-in-law, Chen Ji. Chen Ji, a police officer, had been indebted to Yihe for years. It was Yihe's influence that had secured his position and advanced his career, and this familial bond, though seemingly simple, was now an invisible chain that bound him to Yihe's will. To Yihe, this connection was invaluable. It made Chen Ji the ideal candidate for the dirty work he now needed to carry out. In the winter of 2007, during a visit to Yihe's home for the Lunar New Year, the two men discussed the growing problem that Haiping represented. Yihe laid out his concerns, subtly hinting at the need for a solution. Chen Ji, feeling the weight of his gratitude and loyalty, agreed to help. He rationalized that, since his career and position were all thanks to Yihe, he owed him this service. The plan was set into motion, but the first attempt, an orchestrated traffic accident, proved unfeasible. Haiping's routine was too predictable, and her work routes didn't allow for enough speed or chaos to ensure the death would be perceived as an accident. The plan fell apart before it could even begin. But Chen Ji, ever the problem solver, quickly came up with a new idea, a more permanent, more certain solution. As a former military engineer, Chen Ji had the expertise to create an explosive device. He proposed using a bomb to carry out the job, reasoning that once the explosion occurred, all traces of the crime would be erased. There would be no evidence, no way to trace it back to them. It seemed like the perfect plan. Yihe, who had become increasingly desperate, agreed to the new plan, supplying Chen Ji with all the information he needed: Haiping's home address, car keys, and her daily routine. With access to his police connections, Chen Ji had no trouble acquiring the necessary materials to build the bomb. He enlisted the help of a garage owner, Chen Changbing, who specialized in remote-controlled devices. Together they worked in secret, designing a device that could trigger a deadly explosion. They ran several tests, refining the device, and after 2 initial trials, they were ready for the real thing. The device was made with 2 kilograms of explosives, powerful enough to cause irreparable damage. As they put the finishing touches on their weapon, a moment of hesitation struck Chen Ji. For the first time, the gravity of what they were about to do hit him. He realized that with a single press of a button, he could take someone's life, and there would be no chance for redemption or forgiveness. His conscience stirred, but despite the inner turmoil, he continued with the plan. He delayed the act as long as he could, but on July 9, 2007, the moment of truth arrived. Chen Ji and Changbing, both nervous but resolute, drove to the location where Haiping worked. Using the remote control, they planted the bomb in her car, a light blue Honda, and quickly left the scene. As they waited on the roadside, nerves high, they hoped that their plan would work. But fate, ever cruel, had other plans. After waiting for several minutes, they lost sight of Haiping's car, and the 2 men grew increasingly anxious. Finally, after a desperate decision, they moved to another location where Haiping was known to drive regularly. Here, they waited patiently, their hearts pounding with anticipation. Chen Ji, holding the remote, watched the road, his finger hovering over the button. The car eventually appeared, and with a signal from Changbing, the devastating explosion was triggered. The blast tore through the street, destroying the car and killing Haiping instantly. The aftermath of the explosion sent shockwaves through the community. As chaos erupted in the streets, a vigilant old woman, who had witnessed the events unfold, took note of a strange detail: the unfamiliar man with the peculiar accent who had been standing nearby, and the police car that had driven away immediately after the explosion. This seemingly insignificant observation would prove to be the key that would unravel the entire conspiracy. 3 days later, Yihe was arrested, and within hours he confessed to his involvement in the plot. The investigation expanded quickly, revealing not just his role in Haiping's death, but also his deep involvement in a vast corruption scheme. In the end, Yihe and Chen Ji were sentenced to death, while Chen Changbing received a life sentence for his role in the crime. The tragic affair between Yihe and Haiping, built on lies, manipulation, and corrupted power, led to a tragedy that exposed the darkness beneath the veneer of success and wealth.